everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzis. I am here with Carrie Eleveld, and we're so hyped because we won an election that nobody thought we would win, except Carrie and me and Simon Rosenberg and Joe Trippi and a handful of other people. We were out in that limb, and we weren't even on a limb. But everybody else made us feel like we were on a limb.
Oh God, when when you're swimming upstream against everyone, there are definitely days where you're like, Jesus, I hope I'm right. You know what I mean, even though you feel like you're following the facts and you're staying true to what you believe, you just like going against everyone is still sort of can get in your head.
Yeah, I mean, we sat there for the last year of this podcast and writing on Daily Kos, talking about how the dynamics of the midterm 2022 elections were not going to be a typical midterm election. It was not going to be a referendum on Joe Biden. It wasn't even going to be about the economy. It was going to be about Roe v. Wade, and it was going to be about Donald Trump, and by extension, democracy, since Donald Trump and the danger of our democracy are synonymous at this point. And we looked at the data and we looked at election results and we looked at the numbers and everything backed us up. Yet you're thinking, what if? Like, what are we missing that everybody else seems to be so sure about? And there's been years where we've been wrong. Like, I thought Hillary Clinton was going to beat Donald Trump and it wasn't even going to be that close. So there's that, like, is this one of those years where you're so sure of yourself? But we looked at all the data and all the numbers and all the history and the election results, special election results, and we had a solid case. And so what was even perhaps more likely to be the worst case scenario wasn't that we'd be wrong, is that they would be right for the wrong reasons. Like they it's because of gas prices, or it's because of this. What if our people didn't turn out? Then it would maybe not have been about gas prices. Maybe it would have been about something completely different. Might have been youth voters turned out. That was not a given. And so maybe youth vote doesn't turn out and we lose those close elections. And instead of having these narrow wins across the board that helped us keep the Senate and minimize losses in the House, maybe it would have been enough to create that wave election. And all you're talking about is shifting, maybe 1 or 2 points. So there's a lot that could have gone wrong. And then they would have pointed at us and laughed and said how wrong we were. And the underlying dynamics of the race were not wrong. This was not an election about Joe Biden. This was not an election about inflation or about gas prices. And Donald Trump was really a factor in this race. So we were right about those underlying trends. And luckily for us, the election turned out how it did. And so just to give a recap of where we are as we record this podcast is that the Democrats have 50 seats in the Senate. Republicans have 49. And we have an outstanding runoff in Georgia, which I'm feeling pretty good about. I'm thinking we're going to win that runoff in 2 weeks. So
and let's just say the reason that we have a better chance now is that, number one, the Senate majority doesn't depend on that race. So it's easier for, Republicans who might be a little demoralized by what happened, who aren't particularly thrilled about this, Mr. Word Salad himself, violent tendencies, alleged spousal abuser, deadbeat dad, Herschel Walker, right? He's not exciting for a lot of Republicans, and they're just much less likely to turn out just because tribalism, as long as the Senate majority isn't on the line, and it's not. Whereas our voters are hyped up, they're excited, especially Black voters who made history in 2018. I don't think they want, Raphael Warnock to lose that reelection to the post to 6 years. So there's a lot of reasons to think that Democrats, even in Georgia, which, traditionally has been a very Republican state for a long time, have potentially an upper hand now in that runoff election on December 6th.
Yeah, and just another reason, again, there's lots of them, but another reason is that Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, proved to be pretty popular. He inoculated himself against Donald Trump because Donald Trump went after him in the primary and rhetorically. And so it was really hard for Democrats to say he's a Trump Republican. And when given the chance to try and steal the election in 2020, he refused. Raffensperger, who won the Secretary of State for re-election, they all refused to play along. So it was really hard for us to argue they were a threat to democracy because they were actually more like old line Republicans. And we may disagree on taxes and on immigrants and stuff, but at least they're not anti-democracy. And so they were rewarded by that with those suburban Atlanta college-educated white voters, while a lot of them led support for their Republican ticket in the Senate. So for Herschel Walker, and those people may or may not turn out, but there's a lot of Republicans that voted Republican at the top of the ticket and just voted Republican all the way down. And they may have wanted to come out for Brian Kemp. They're not probably as motivated to come out for Herschel Walker. So I'm feeling really, really good about that. Anything else you got there, or should we move on to the House?
No, I think that's good. I just wanted to make that clear.
So in the House, right now, it looks like it's going to be 222 to 118 Republicans, so about a 4-seat Republican majority. And yeah, we wanted to keep the House. It was always an uphill battle. We always talked about how it was an uphill battle. But the projections were that Republicans were going to win in this wave election. They were going to get 20 to 40 seats, right? You know, some Republicans right before the election were talking about their tsunami, Carrie. There was a red tsunami coming, and they were going to win 50 seats. It was going to be like back in the bridge.
50 is an undercount, according to Kevin McCarthy. He was like, "Oh, you know, the Democrats won 65 seats or whatever in 2018, and you know, we could be higher than that. We could be 70. We could be." I mean, it's just like,
so they only won. They only have a 4-seat majority, so I think that's a net swing of about 8 seats, and that is all those seats that they picked up were because of redistricting. So it was all of the redistricting shenanigans that allowed them to pick up the necessary seats. And there was a massive underperformance of Democrats in New York, which is a different story for a different day. I feel, Carrie, just looking ahead really quickly, I feel really good about 2024 with presidential year turnout in California and in New York. A lot of these moderate districts, Biden district Republicans, I don't see how they survive unless maybe they can switch parties right now. So, but let's talk a little bit about this 4-seat majority, because the Freedom Caucus, led by Jim Jordan and Andy Biggs of Arizona, had basically said that Kevin McCarthy does not have the votes to be speaker.
Yeah. I mean, shocking, right? We all thought, you know, everyone's gonna get behind Kevin McCarthy. No one thought that. No one. I mean, especially look, Kevin McCarthy was out there. He violated like the number one rule of business, which applies many other places, including politics. You don't overpromise and underdeliver. And, you know, he just couldn't help himself. He had to brag about how it was going to be a red wave or red tsunami. And he wasn't just moderately saying, look, I think we're going to gain double-digit seats. Could be as high as, 30 or something more, but, could be lower. Like he wasn't doing that. He wasn't playing the game of let's not make sure that we tell people it's going to be this and then we end up hitting below. He should have been minimizing how many he really thought they were going to get. Instead, he was maximizing, like going way above what they really thought. So they, under his leadership, they terribly underdelivered for the GOP conference. And it is now a nightmare scenario for him. And let's just remember, Nancy Pelosi, when she was leader of a caucus just this past 2 years that had essentially a 5-seat majority, managed to get a whole bunch of really significant legislation through. Historic investments in climate change, battling climate change. The chip investment, where there's going to be a lot more microchips and stuff manufactured here in the United States rather than China. There's, and she got codifying Roe through. Of course, we couldn't get it through the Senate. She got a voting rights piece of legislation through. We couldn't get it through the Senate. But the number of things that she got through, the American Rescue Plan that she got through and did get through the Senate, the number of things she managed to get through with 5 seats, you're going to see basically essentially the same majority for House Republicans right now. And I don't even think they're going to be able to decide on a speaker. Sorry, go ahead.
No. So this actually creates a real sort of question: is somebody has to be speaker? And you have in New York, as mentioned, there's a bunch of Republicans in New York and in California, and there's actually one in Michigan that represent Biden districts that somehow squeak through because of various dynamics. The New York Democratic Party was self-destructing. These are seats that are definitely in the our top pickup opportunities in 2024. But what do those Republicans do right now? They don't want, and some of them have already spoken up. They don't want to be talking about Hunter Biden's laptop. And when House Republicans had their first press conference after it was confirmed they would have the majority, they didn't talk about inflation. They did not talk about gas prices. They talked about, I wish I was exaggerating. They talked about Hunter Biden's laptop. So you have these inevitably moderate Republicans in very tough districts. They're basically rentals at this point. They're not going to hold those districts.
They're
and they're going like, I have maybe 5-10% chance to survive. I have 0% chance to survive if we're going to spend the next 2 years talking about Hunter Biden's laptop.
And which they are. I mean, and that's not even an if, right? That is happening. So they may be saying if to themselves, but that train has already left the station.
So there is a real possibility, and I know it's been reported that there's a real possibility that Democrats can actually join with some of these moderate Republicans to elect one of these moderate Republicans as speaker. And the name that's been thrown out is Congressman Bacon from that Nebraska 2nd Congressional District, which is a Biden district. And he's Teflon. He seems to survive every year, barely survives in a very tough district. And although it was redrawn this year, and he got a couple extra red points in it, and that's what saved him. So again, another example where even minor shifts in the maps can save a seat for them. Sure. But there's talk about maybe having one of those guys. That's what's happened in Alaska. So this is not even unprecedented in Alaska. You've had Democrats team up with moderate Republicans in both the state Senate and the state House to elect moderate Republicans to run those chambers in a weird power sharing agreement that actually, honestly, is working. Like, actually seems to be a very effective way to govern if what we care about is less about the partisanship and more about getting stuff done.
Sure.
And so this is an actual real possibility. And so I suspect when push comes to shove.
Just to be clear, if we manage to do something like that, right? Democrats joining with these like handful of moderate Republicans to elect a speaker, they are going to be more beholden to the Democratic caucus than they are the Republican caucus. So if in your head you're like, well, I don't care which Republican runs the caucus, they're going to do like all these really conservative things. They won't be able to do that. Probably. It depends
Hunter
on the rules.
Biden's laptop.
Yeah, right.
If nothing else. Nothing else.
Right. I mean, they will not be able, if they owe their speakership, and it depends on the rules how they can be removed or not removed or whatever. But if they owe their speakership to Democrats, they're gonna have to absolutely moderate what they do. Absolutely. I mean, but it is gonna be a cat fight. It doesn't matter whether it's Kevin McCarthy or Jim Jordan or this more, a more conservative, moderate, sort of old school Republican. The GOP caucus, the infighting there is going to be spectacular. So
it already is. It's amazing. Yeah. And to be clear, if I had to guess, if you ask me right now, what do I think is going to happen? I think what's going to happen is that those Jim Jordans, they're going to realize that the alternative to them backing McCarthy is going to be a moderate Republican elected with Democratic votes. And so they'll do what a lot of moderate conservative Democrats did with Pelosi. They just forgot to show up the day of the election. And so they didn't have to cast a vote against her or for her. They just kind of like, oops, was it today? Was the election today? And so that way they don't have to vote for McCarthy, so they can maintain their purity. But McCarthy still is the speaker. So I suspect that's what's going to happen in the end of the day. But these people are nihilists. Like, they don't care. So what's logical and rational to me and you and our listeners, it may not be what they do.
And that's a fair point, because if you remember that they already went through a dress rehearsal for this back in 2017 when Trump was first elected. Kevin McCarthy was supposed to be the heir apparent there. He was supposed to be the speaker, and he couldn't assemble the votes. And the whole caucus sort of went into spiraled downward. And then they all came up with Paul Ryan as an alternative that both the, crazy Freedom Caucus and the more moderates could come together on. And they ended up electing him speaker instead of McCarthy. And and McCarthy, I'm sure, has been smarting over that ever since. He's so desperate to be speaker. He would promise anything to be won. But with this slim majority, he may still not be able to get it done. I mean, it is possible. Matt Gaetz is out there, this Republican from Florida, right? Who has a few other things going on in terms of federal investigations into his, into his like human trafficking issues. It's just like, woo, what is going on there? But anyway, he is, he's already promising that he has I think 5 votes or whatever is necessary to scuttle McCarthy becoming speaker. So it seems like that would be the logical thing, is they would conclude, oh, well, if we don't go with McCarthy, then we could end up with something worse or whatever. But you don't know with these people. Honestly, they are like, that's what makes them so dangerous, is how unpredictable and how nihilistic they are. So we have no idea what kind of ride we're on. I just know that for Republicans, it's not going to be a good one. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there's a non-zero chance that some of those at-risk Republicans may just switch parties. They may see
true.
how this is, if self-preservation kicks in. Most of those, I'm just scanning through. Most of those are not they're not the stop the steal, big lie type of Republicans. I mean, they were actually pretty decent Republicans for the districts, and so they're not. They're Republicans, but they're not Trump Republicans. So there's again, I would put the chances of that happening like 5 to 10%, right? But it's in play, because it's such a shit show in the House right now that chaos may actually move things in ways that are not really expected. Although we're talking about it, so maybe it's a little expected, but it's within the realm of possibility. So it's dramatic. And Carrie, I would argue, and you tell me if you agree or not, I would argue that a Republican-held House with this like 4 or 5 seat majority, once all the districts are counted, so we might see a +1, -1 margin of error on the final margin. But I would argue that it actually helps Democrats, because they got most of their legislation through, the signature legislation. So Biden already has material to run on. The Senate is in Democratic hands, so we get our judges in, so that the House has nothing to do with judges. And so the House, really, it would have been great, because we could have kept, the January 6th commission could have been, cranking through without any deadlines, ending the commission and digging deeper and deeper. But in all, incumbent presidents generally get reelected because they run against the obstructionist House or Senate of the other party. Because traditionally, as we've talked a million times, the party out of power usually wins control of Congress in that midterm election, and then they're a foil. And so if you have unified Democratic governance, then it's anything that voters were pissed off about, it's kind of hard to blame Republicans for it. I mean, of course, filibuster, this and that, right? But from a political standpoint, it's hard to blame Republicans when people go, you're in the majority. Now you got the House to run against. And this House is so nuts that they're going to be doing Hunter Biden laptops. So they're going to be like, we can run against a House that cares more about Hunter Biden's laptop than inflation. Like, you turned that around on them. If you cared so much about inflation, if you cared so much about gas prices, why are you talking about Hunter Biden's laptop? So I think this is good for Biden. It's good for Democrats. It helps us keep the Senate in a very difficult map in 2024. It's a brutal map. And we got to defend places like Montana and Sherrod Brown in Ohio. And our only pickup opportunities are like Florida and Texas. I mean, it's not looking great. So our best case scenario really is just to hold our ground and maybe not lose. Or, if we have 51 seats, we can then we can lose 2 seats at that point. Sure. And get back down to 50-50 Senate. But having a McCarthy, having a Freedom Caucus run House actually really, really improves our chances in 2024. That's my theory. I don't know how you feel
Oh
about
no,
that.
I 100% agree with you. Listen, I wanted to keep the House, right? I wanted to do that because we could have gotten some things through if we'd kept both the House and the Senate that we weren't able to get through if we got a little bit more leverage in the Senate, and we might end up getting one seat more leverage, which actually would have been helpful because then you don't have to get both Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. You just have to get one of them. And you can negotiate with one of them. Negotiating with both of them is a lot harder because they have different interests in the end. So, we might have been able to get some more through. We might have been able to get a voting rights package through, slim. But anyway, we might have been, there's some things that we might have been able to do. We might have been able to codify Roe. There might have been just enough Republican support for that. So anyway, but we didn't get it. And if we didn't keep both chambers, the other goal, which was a major goal, I always felt like from the beginning, which was to do so well that we completely demoralized Republicans and they went into a nosedive. They just started spiraling out. And that's what we did. Democrats, Democratic voters, Democratic activists and organizers and young people and, suburban women and everybody who came out for this coalition, of course, which is people of color, young voters of color, especially. All of these things, all of these people came together and delivered such an electoral blow that even though Republicans managed to take the House by a very slim majority, they're now, it's now a disaster for them. I mean, not only does it have implications, which we've just talked about at length for the House, but McConnell now has McConnell now has a leadership challenge in the Senate, right, with Senator Rick Scott. I wouldn't be surprised if Rick Scott makes another chance at it, takes another try. But, his McConnell does not have a great hold on that caucus now. And in many ways, Rick Scott hobbled them more than he helped them. But Rick Scott is pointing at Mitch McConnell and saying, look, you're the leader of this caucus, and we may have lost seats. Like, we didn't gain seats. We didn't overtake and you have to remember, Rick Scott was chair of the GOP committee that was tasked with overturning the majority, right?
Yeah.
So none of this makes any sense, right? I mean, Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, Republican senator, he's the one who put out this 11-point plan where he was going to raise taxes on working and middle-class Americans. He was going to sunset Social Security and Medicare. He was, all of these things that he fiscally totally kneecapped the NRSC, the committee, and they had to cancel tens of millions of dollars in advertising at the last second. He like ran that effort to flip the Senate into the ground, but it doesn't matter. He and Donald Trump are going to blame Mitch McConnell, and he's already, Rick Scott's already making a bid to try and get people like Ted Cruz, sort of the Trump wing of the Senate caucus, to oppose McConnell. Now, he might fail, but it's really clear now that Mitch McConnell does not have what I would call a firm grip on that caucus, because if he did, he wouldn't have any challenge at all. Okay, that's the first thing. But then you think about the other repercussion this has had, how well Democrats have done, is that Donald Trump thought he was going to just ride all of his triumphs into a glorious, I'm running for president again in 2024. Yeah. I mean, he thought that he was going to be able to ride his victories into a presidential bid that would then stop out all of his opposition. And that is not what has happened. He is at one of his weakest, most precarious points ever. And I just want to be clear. It's not that Republican voters don't like Trumpism. They do like Trumpism, but they like to win. So they like the brash, in your face, own the libs kind of vibe.
Cruelty.
Cruelty. Right? The cruelty is the point, right? They like that. those MAGA Republicans, but they want to win. And so they would much rather have DeSantis run. They would much rather have a fresh face who's going to be just as cruel and horrible as Trump is, but can be a winner. And now Trump is a 3-time loser. He lost for them in 2018 by historic margins. He lost the White House in 2020, gifted the Senate to Democrats. And now he presided over, most of those major candidates who lost at the top of the ticket were his picks. And he's now presided over a total disaster in 2022. And so he's a 3-time loser. And, just it was, The Economist and YouGov did a poll just before the election where they asked Republicans how many of them wanted Trump to run in 2024. And 60% of them said yes just before the election. And then after the election, they asked again, and only 47% of Republicans said, yes, we want him to run. Now, I'm not saying Trump can't recover. I'm not saying he's dead in the water. He could recover because he's been, he's proven to be that, sort of resilient, partly because Republicans are so spineless. The only Republican who seems to have any spine at all is Liz Cheney, and she's been drummed out of the party.
Right.
So, I mean, she did what Mitch McConnell wouldn't, which is say the election wasn't stolen. Donald Trump is responsible for this, and we cannot have election deniers winning up and down the ticket. Republicans should vote against them. Independents should vote against them. Democrats, everybody should vote against them. McConnell doesn't have that type of backbone. He didn't have the backbone to go out and get the 17 votes he needed to impeach Donald Trump after January 6th, and Donald Trump had threatened their lives. He didn't have that kind of backbone. But in any case, I digress. So now, the other effect here is you've got the House in disarray, House Republicans in disarray, Senate Republicans in disarray, and you've got Trump's bid now is sort of anything but a sure thing. I mean, he probably is going to attract challengers.
Yeah, Carrie, we're definitely going to talk about Donald Trump. I just want to sort of recap what you talked about because there was a lot of good stuff in there. So the hope was that in addition to surviving the election and not having these historic governing party losses, is that if we were able to stop them, that it would sort of collapse the Republican Party into self-recrimination. And that's exactly what has happened. So we have, like Harry said, we have those leadership battles and faction battles in the House. And I still don't think, I'm really curious what these new moderates from New York and California are going to do, because I think we may be seeing a 3-front war developing in the House. The Senate is utterly, racked by infighting. Rick Scott literally said, he was pouting the other day that people are mad at him because he ran against Mitch McConnell for the leadership post, and that's because the elites won't want me. This guy ran the National Republican Senate Committee, like the elites, and by the way, Ron DeSantis, we should start calling him Jeb Bush 2.0 because he may very well be the next Florida governor savior that fizzles out. But and then obviously, so Congress is a mess, and in that is all of conservative media. They're all fighting with each other over should they have had Masters in Arizona as their Senate candidate, or Oz in Pennsylvania, or I mean, keep in mind, we talked about the victories. I forgot to mention, Carrie, we won the governorships and Secretary of State offices in 6 of the 7 battleground states. The only one we didn't was Nevada, and the Republican who narrowly won in Nevada the governor's race is not an election denier. So, but we won the Secretary of State office there. So Arizona, Michigan, it wasn't even close in Michigan. Republicans were utterly wiped out. We even took control of the state legislatures in Michigan. Pennsylvania, we took control of the state house. That wasn't expected. Nobody thought that was in play. We won the state house. In Wisconsin, we kept the governorship. So these are critical. And then in Georgia, we didn't. But as we talked about, they were not election deniers. So everywhere that election deniers ran, we beat them. That is incredibly important. And so some may argue that this was almost Biden's plan, right? He kept talking about MAGA Republicans. They're different than other Republicans. So he created this ability in voters to sort of bifurcate between the Trump Republicans and the non-Republicans. And a lot of us argued that that wasn't helpful because they're all Republican. Who knows? Like, I'm not going to sit there and second guess it right now because we at least did not get these election denying anti-democracy Republicans winning in any battleground state. That is huge going into 2024. So in all that, obviously, recrimination, the conservative media is eating each other alive. Everybody's fighting. Everybody hates each other. Ann Coulter was calling for Donald Trump's head. I mean, they're all like on, they're all just all beaten up on each other. It's glorious. I mean, it's so much fun. Now we have the presidential race, right? And so clearly the big two battle lines are Trump and DeSantis, the governor of Florida. Mike Pompeo, who was a former Secretary of State, he thinks he's running. We can all laugh, point at him and laugh. Who else? Nikki Haley thinks she's running. We can point and laugh. Who else thinks he's running?
Mike Pence. Mike Pence thinks.
Mike Pence.
I mean, no one likes Mike Pence. I mean, no one
likes Mike Pence. So really, it's Trump versus DeSantis, and it's because they're the Republican Party is the MAGA party, and both of those are from the same wing. The only difference is, do you want the OG Trump or the one that maybe has a better chance of winning? Like, that's the battle line at this point. And Carrie, you wrote a piece about, like, they talk about it. Like, what happened? Like, what is worse for the Republican Party? Does Trump win the nomination or does he lose the nomination?
Well, I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, here's the problem for the Republican Party. I don't want to underplay Trump. He is a threat to the country. Okay. And if he's on the ticket, he's a threat to the country. But anybody who's within that MAGA wing, who's Trump or Trump light, doesn't matter. They're a threat to the country too. But the Republicans' sort of worst nightmare is either Trump winning the nomination or losing it, right? Right. It doesn't matter which, because if he wins the nomination, anti-MAGA majorities, anti-Trump majorities have now turned out in 3 elections to deliver a wake-up call to the Republicans that they just can't seem to, like, pick up. They're just not getting, they're not getting it. So
I mean, if we won this midterm election, they're in trouble in 2024.
They are in serious trouble if Trump is leading up that ticket, right? Now, so that's a real problem for them. I mean, I told you that 47% of people, he's down to where 47% of people want him. Only 47% of Republicans, this is Republicans, want him to run in that poll, but that's still probably just strong enough for him to win. If he takes on 1 or 2 other people and they split the vote in any way, his loyalists are so loyal that he's probably strong enough to still win the primary.
For context, Republican primaries, the states are winner take all. In a Democratic primary, the delegates are apportioned proportionate to the vote that the candidates get. So, if you win narrowly, Ohio, you get like 5 delegates versus 4 delegates to the second place, just making up numbers, but it's proportionate. For Republicans, the winner gets everything. So you can win with like 30% of the vote, you get all the delegates, which is exactly how Trump won the nomination in 2016.
Right. So there's that. But then there's the slim possibility that somehow Trump doesn't win the primary. He doesn't win the nomination. And if that happens, you can be guaranteed that Trump will do everything in his power to ruin, to kneecap, destroy that nominee, because he doesn't care. I mean, some Republicans are like, well, Paul Ryan in particular, the former House Speaker, right? I mean, he just is such a lack of imagination. He was like, oh, well, Trump would never kneecap the Republican nominee because that would mean that they
already did.
Yeah, right. That would mean that he was gifting the country to the left, right? I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's what he said. He's being a gift to the left, the country, right? And I'm like, no. Trump doesn't care if he turns the, country over to the Democrats. What he cares about is making sure that a Republican Party that has finally cut him loose, if it manages to do that, will never be successful, right? His biggest, his sort of biggest goal in all of this has been to bring the Republican Party to heel. And so if the party is going to manage to try to cut him loose, try to move on without him, have a nominee who isn't him, he will do anything. And that includes what people have been recently warning. He could form a third party. He could try to run independent, and that will absolutely kneecap Republicans in the general election too. Absolutely. Because there's a type of independent candidate who draws both some Republicans and Democrats to them. But Trump is not that candidate. He purely takes from the Republican side of the equation, purely. I mean, with maybe some independents, but he's not going to get anyone who might vote for a Democrat, right? There's been people like Justin Amash, that former, House Republican from Michigan, who was sort of exploring in 2020 a third party bid. And I think the reason he didn't do it is because he did all the polling and he concluded that there was no way for a third party person to run and not take some Democratic votes with him in a way that it set up the Republican to win the general election. But that's not the case with the Trump, right? Trump isn't going to get any of those swing voters. He's only going to take from the Republican side. So, and some people are like, well, he won't have the organizational prowess or the discipline to get on all 50 ballots and whatever. He doesn't care about winning. I mean, yeah, he would want to win, but if he didn't have the time or the organization to get on all 50 ballots through petition, he doesn't have to do that to kneecap the Republicans. He could get on in a handful of states, and he
doesn't even need that write-in.
Yeah,
everybody knows how to spell Donald Trump.
Exactly. He could be a write-in candidate. He doesn't even need to formally be on the ballot. He could do a write-in campaign in a handful of states, and he would absolutely, kill Republican chances. So Republicans are kind of like, well, what can we say other than they're screwed one way or the other? I mean, if he is the top of the ticket in 2024, that is really bad for the Republican Party. And I don't relish having to turn back Trump again at all, because once again, it's going to be, no holds barred. We got to get everybody to the polls. Yep. We're all worried about it, pulling our hair out, whatever. But we have a good chance of prevailing in that situation, and they have a much better chance of failing in that situation. And that is bad news for them, but it's just as bad a news for them, I think, if the nomination goes to someone else and Trump's just goes on his vendetta tour and, does a write-in campaign or gets on some of those ballots in some states.
That is our show for today. Carrie, the last like year, 2 years, like we've ended the show asking people to donate to, campaigns that they care about, and to volunteer, and to vote early, and to be engaged, and to get their friends and family to vote. And you don't have to do that right now.
No, you do. You have to do it in Georgia. You have to do it in Georgia.
Georgia.
Yep.
Georgia.
Go to dailykos.com/GOTV, and there are current actions for how you can help out in Georgia right now. Yeah. Sorry.
Boy, did I screw that one up.
We can cut that out in the podcast. The Potters don't need to hear that. Yeah.
I'm ready. Georgia's happening in 2 weeks. And then I'm ready for some holidays. I'm ready to sort of relax. I'm ready to bask in the fun, the entertainment that will be the Republican Party, and the shit show that is their caucus and their internal civil war. And I'm going to have fun watching Donald Trump go after DeSantis, and those fireworks are going to be amazing. And so, yeah, Georgia, everybody, Georgia. And then we can sit back for a little while, understanding that 2024, no matter what, it's going to be a big year. We may have some special elections. Probably we'll have some special elections next year. So there's things on the plate that are coming up, but I think we've earned, people work their butts off. Yes. They earned this victory. So much love and appreciation for everything that you guys have done to make that possible, to be engaged in our democracy, and to really defy history. Because
absolutely,
midterms like this, I think this was the most successful midterm for a sitting president since like 1936. I mean, it's been something like that, and
Yeah.
or maybe it was like 19. It was during World War II. Things were
Mhm.
happening.
Yeah, right,
Big
right,
things were
right.
happening. So the fact that we defied history wasn't an accident. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It's because people did not listen to that dominant media narrative and listen to the people who said this was a Republican wave election, and
Right.
we pull through. We defied all the odds, and so much love and respect. And let's just finish the job in Georgia, feeling good about it,
Yep.
but we can't take anything for granted, never.
Yep.
And just take a moment to really like pat yourself in the back for everything that
Absolutely.
you've done.
If you're listening to this podcast or you're watching us live, I guarantee you were a part of the solution
Yep.
this year. So pat yourself on the back. Enjoy your friends and family. We so appreciate you keeping up with us, staying tuned into politics and being engaged. And just happy holidays to all of you.
So thank you so very much. We'll get a chance to say happy holidays too next week and the week after. We're not going anywhere just yet. But thanks everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks to everybody that makes this show possible. Carrie, Walter, our producer, everybody behind the scenes, Paul, Dorothy. Am I missing anybody? I don't think I'm missing anybody. So
Did you get
thanks.
Kara? You got Kara.
Oh, Kara.
Kara?
I knew I was missing
Yes,
somebody. I
Kara.
knew I was
Kara.
missing Kara.
Yes.
And thanks to you, the listener, the viewer, and readers, those of you who visit us at Daily Kos. Thanks for everything you do. So much love and appreciation for everything that we've accomplished because we've moved mountains. We defied history. Thank you so much. Catch you all next week.